everybody? How's it going? Ben Gothard here. And today I want to talk about this book right here, The Strengths-Based Leadership by Tom Rath, and Gallup Press. Now, what's really interesting about this book is that it is not just reading material, right? It is really cool because it actually comes with a test, and it helps you figure out your own leadership style and your own strengths when it comes to leadership, and then it actually goes into all the different pieces of that, and it's really cool. You go online and you take this test, and then you can go through and read and see what the results are and what that actually means for you, right? And so what's cool about strengths-based leadership is, in order to truly maximize yourself as a leader, and in order to really take yourself to the next level of success and entrepreneurship, whatever you may be doing, it truly helps to know yourself and to know your own strengths, right? And that's kind of the whole theme of the book, is that it is truly, truly important to be very self-aware, right? So I just want to give you some thoughts and takeaways on this book, because I did think it was a fantastic read, right? So I want to start off by saying, by actually quoting something from the book, and the quote goes, "The best leaders get to live on," right? So what does that mean? Well, according to the book, the very best leaders are the ones who not only develop their businesses and they build up whatever they're leading, organizations that they're leading while they're there, but they actually set up that organization for greater future success, right? Whether that be through the people that they train, the other leaders that they develop, whether it be the systems that they put in place, whatever it may be, the best leaders get to live on. And I thought that was very powerful. So I want to basically give you 3 takeaways from this book, right? The first is, the most effective leaders are always investing in strengths, okay? Now, you may be thinking, okay, duh, that's just a given, right? You invest in your strengths, great. But what a lot of people actually do is they try to cover up their weaknesses. They try to bring their bottom up, right? They try to compensate for their weaknesses, and they don't try to really play to their strengths. And that is a disservice to yourself, right? That is a disservice to the individual. And so what this book argues, and I happen to agree with it, is that instead of trying to figure out how to compensate for your weaknesses, just focus on your strengths, right? Like if you're a really, really good communicator, you have really good social skills, but you're not as good in math, don't spend all your time trying to become okay at math. Spend your time building those social skills and seeing how far that can take you, because you have a lot more natural talent towards certain things, and it just makes sense. Play on that natural talent, and that's one of the things that this book really harps on, right? Is that the most effective leaders are always investing in strengths, whether it be their own strength, whether it be the strengths of the people around them, their employees, even the strengths of their customers, right? Leaders are always investing in strengths. Now, I want to read you a little bit from this book because I think it truly is powerful. And this was a quote by the former NATO Supreme Allied Commander Wesley Clark in the New York Times Magazine. And he said, "I've never met an effective leader who wasn't aware of his talents and working to sharpen them." Right? And so that kind of goes back to the point that I was just saying. Leaders, effective leaders, recognize their strengths. Not only do they recognize them, but they invest in their strengths. They try to sharpen that axe, the axe being their strengths, and they try to always take their game to the next level. Right? So that kind of goes back to 2 things that I was talking about. Of one, you not only have to be very aware of what you're really good at, but you have to invest in it. You have to play to it, right? If you're an extremely good goalie, let's make an analogy to soccer. If you're an extremely good goalie, then there's no reason that you should be spending your time trying to score the ball all the way other end of the field. It just doesn't make sense. You should be spending time being a goalie, practicing your skills as a goalie. right? Let's relate it to basketball. If you're Shaquille O'Neal and you are one of the greatest centers to have played the game, you're not going to practice your like technical dribbling skills and passing skills as much as a point guard would. It just doesn't make sense, right? You want to focus on the things that a center needs to focus on in order to become the best center that you could be, right? It doesn't make sense to try to focus on being the best point guard because you're not. You're the center. And it just doesn't make sense, right? So I want to read you another part from this book because I think there are a lot of really good nuggets of wisdom that can come from this book. And I'm not going to just read you the whole book, but I do want to pick out certain parts that I think are very impactful. And so this is a quote from Clifton. And Clifton, it's actually called the Clifton Strengths Finder test, which is the test that goes along with this. So he is the father of strengths psychology and inventor of the Clifton Strength Finder. So he's quoted with this: "A leader needs to know his strengths as a carpenter knows his tools, or as a physician knows the instruments at her disposal. What great leaders have in common is that each truly knows his or her strengths and can call on the right strength at the right time. This explains why there is no definitive list of characteristics that describes all leaders." Now, isn't that powerful? Isn't that powerful, right? What I got from that was that not only should we absolutely recognize our strengths and play to those, but that there are any number of combinations of strengths that can form good leaders. Right? I'm going to say that again. There are any number of combinations of skills and characteristics that can meld to form a good leader. Okay? And so what Clifton was saying was that there is no one best leader. Right? And there is no one best skill set for a leader to have. And that's really important because, yeah, you might look up to this leader or that leader or, somebody who might not be a good leader. You say, okay, I don't want to learn from them, right? And each of them may have different skill sets. But the two good leaders may have completely different skill sets and they still may be good leaders. It all depends on how you work with what you got, right? Because we all have certain innate skills and abilities. And if we allow ourselves to focus on those strengths, those innate skills and abilities that we do have, then we can be a lot more effective, right? So that's the first point that I want to make, is that the most effective leaders are always investing in their strengths. The second one is that the most effective leaders surround themselves with the right people and then maximize their team. Okay, and this is incredibly important for not only business, but for life in general, right? If you surround yourself with people, the right people, then you can go far. There is a principle, I'm not exactly sure what it's called, but there's a principle that you are the average of the 5 people around you that you spend the most time with. And whether or not it's true, I do think there's some merit in the idea that the people that you surround yourself with influence you, right? And so I'll give you an example. If you are surrounded by people who every single one of them went to school, got good grades, went to college, got a good job, and is now working for somebody else, then that is going to seem a lot more normal to you than if the 5 people that you were closest to all started their own businesses. Right? It's just a difference in mindset because of the different people around you. Now, there are, of course, exceptions, and there will always be people that go against the grain, and it doesn't matter who they're surrounded by, they're just going to do their own thing, right? But most of the time, a lot of us, and myself included, we're all influenced by the people around us. So, we can't change the people around us, and I'm not saying we should, but I'm saying we should change the people who we surround ourselves with, right? Let me say that again. The people who are around us now, it doesn't make sense to try to change each and every one of them individually, try to change how they operate, but we can change the people that we do surround ourselves with, right? And so if you're trying to start your own business or write your own book or whatever it is that you're trying to do, if you surround yourself with people who are already successful doing the things that you want to do, then you not only have role models to look up to, but you have people to ask questions. You have really good contacts around you. You have just a good environment, more than likely a positive environment, right? And having those people around you, it's going to help you get to a much higher level than hanging out with people who don't have any aspiration and don't want to start a business at all and are comfortable, living paycheck to paycheck. And there's nothing wrong with that. But if you do want to take yourself to the next level, it's important to be aware that these things are occurring, whether or not we are aware of them now, right? And so, again, the most effective leaders, according to this book, and I happen to agree with it, the most effective leaders surround themselves with with the right people, right? And so what do I mean by the right people? Well, I know, and I'll give you an example, a very personal example. I know that I am not very organized. And I'm okay with that, right? I'm a very creative person. I like to just do something and let it do its thing and not really try to organize it and shelve it and do all these things and then maybe come back to it later. But when it comes to organization, that's just not a skill of mine. So in business, some of the things that I'm looking for in the people that I work with is organization, right? Because if somebody is very organized and maybe not so creative, well, that's great. I can do my creative thing, they can do their organization thing, and we'll get along. We'll work well together, right? Because they're complementing my strengths and I'm complementing theirs. And not only that, but they're also putting a strength at my weakness, right? So their strength may be organization, my weakness is organization. Okay, great. They can do it, right? And so if you surround yourself with people who not only can they help you to multiply or really help you play on your strengths. Not only that, but if they can help you to shore up your weaknesses, if they can kind of take the reins on the things that you're not good at, that allows you to really focus on what you're best at, right? So, again, I want to read you a piece from this book on this thought. And this quote is from Israeli President Shimon Peres when he expressed his views on this topic of surrounding yourself with the right people. What you have to think of is the potential of the person, not his appearance. And if you can discover hidden potentials that can make a great difference to your organization, you have to distinguish between loyalty and brilliance. Most leaders prefer loyalty over brilliance. They're afraid that they're going to be undercut. My view is different. Okay? So he actually brings a whole different perspective to this. He's not saying that he wants to find the smartest people in the room to surround himself with, right? He's saying that he would rather discover hidden potentials within people, right? So he wants to find people who are loyal, and he wants to find people who, he doesn't necessarily always look for, preferring loyalty over brilliance, because he says most leaders are afraid that they're going to be undercut. His view is different, right? So he's always looking for very talented people who are the right people who, again, can maximize his team, who he can surround himself with in order to take his organization to the next level. So again, he is always looking for the potential in individuals, and he's not as much worried about being undercut as getting talent on his team, okay? So, that is one very important part of business, right? And I think it's something that a lot of people struggle with is, if I bring somebody in on my team and I train them and I invest all this time and effort into building them up, what happens if they just leave, right? And that's gonna happen. It's inevitable, right? People are not like puppets. People are people, and if you're not okay with trusting people and giving people the knowledge and the training that they need to be successful, then they're not even going to stay with you in the first place, right? So they're not even going to get to that point where they're going to, they're going to move on to the next thing. They're just not going to stay around, right? So I wouldn't worry too much about developing, developed people that you've developed going on and doing different things. They're going to do that anyways, right? You might as well build relationships with people and create allies, right? And again, that goes back to surrounding yourself with the right people. Now, I want to talk about one other quote on this subject, then I want to move on to the third point. And this quote is actually from the author, right? The author, Tom Rath, actually talks about this, and he says, although individuals need not be well-rounded, right? Again, it's playing on your strengths. Teams should be, okay? And so, once again, this really plays on the idea that in your team, you need to surround yourself with the right people to maximize the team, right? So the team needs to be well-rounded, but each individual in the team does not necessarily have to be, right? Because we want to play on our strengths. So you need to assemble a team where everybody can play on their own individual strengths, and together it forms a very cohesive, well-built team, okay? So the third part that I want to talk about, actually, before I talk about the third one, I want to talk about the 4 different domains of leadership, because what this book actually does is it breaks it down into 4 big pieces, right? The first is executing, right? Now, these people who their strength is executing, right, they make things happen. They're the ones that are going to work tirelessly. They're going to take an idea and make that idea a reality, right? So they're really good at being on the ground floor and just doing the work. They're the workhorses. They're the ones that are going to just make stuff happen, right? And so the author gives a really good, in the book, the author gives a really good example of Wendy Kopp, who is the founder and CEO of Teach for America. Now, what's great about this book is that it actually tells her whole story of how she started up the company and built it up to the behemoth that it is today, right? And what's awesome is that it actually goes through how all of her strengths helped her build up the company, right? So it's really cool, but essentially she started off with having to go, in 1 year, she had to find 500 people to come be teachers and help build this organization for Teach for America. She had to get 500 people, and I believe something like $2.5 million in 12 months. She had to assemble this massive effort, and she did it. And it's really cool, her story of how she went about doing that, and how she's now taken this company, Teach for America, and she's made it into this massive organization that it is today through executing and that strength. Then it goes on to talk about the second one, which is influencing. And I've actually taken the test, and my biggest strengths are influencing. I have a little bit of executing, but executing, mostly influencing, and one other one that I'm going to talk about a little bit later. But basically, as an influencer, these people try to reach a broad audience, and they're always selling their ideas. They're always trying to, speak up and be heard and make sure that a large group of people are hearing their ideas. They're being reached, and the ideas that need to be shared are getting out there. And so the idea, or the individual behind this idea of influencing that the book talks about is Simon Cooper, who in 2001 took over as the president of Ritz-Carlton. And the book made a really good point that while Wendy Kopp, the founder of Teach for America, while she started her organization from scratch, Simon Cooper took over the Ritz-Carlton when it was already very, very close to the top. And so the book said it's arguable which one is more difficult, which leader had the most difficult time in the very beginning and throughout their journey. But the author definitely said that Cooper had a lot more to lose, right? Because he was stepping into the shoes of a legendary CEO who left Ritz-Carlton And this gentleman was the brand for many years. So it's cool to see how he came in, Cooper came in, and again, they talk about it in the book, they go into a lot more detail, but he basically upped Ritz-Carlton's game. I mean, he did some brilliant strategic moves. He was very influential in what he did, and he really dug down into why people love to come to the Ritz-Carlton. And he figured that out, and by influencing enough people, he was able to truly take his organization, Ritz-Carlton, to that next level, right? And so it's just really interesting to hear his story. So the third one is relationship building, right? And these people are, with their strength, they are the glue that holds the team together, and they create groups that are greater than the sum of their parts. And it's a very, very impactful skill to have, the relationship building strength, because they're kind of like the lifeblood of the team. Okay, and so the individual that, again, the book used to really demonstrate this leadership style in action is Mervyn Davies, who was the chairman of Standard Chartered Bank, which, when he took over, had about 70,000 employees in 70 different countries. So, I mean, that is just incredible to me, how big of an organization that was, right? And so from the very beginning, he went completely against the grain, Davies did. And he did very unconventional things, and he was a believer that instead of investing in what everybody else is investing in, he wanted to invest in his people and in corporate responsibility. And so he built relationships with very key players early on so that they would trust him, and so that he had the ability to go do these unconventional things that he needed to do in order to take his company to the next level, right? And so it's really interesting to read about this and to hear the story of Davies, because he did some really unconventional things, right? Like in a very short amount of time from when he got started as the chairman of this company, he actually replaced his CFO, his chief financial officer, who had had tons of years in, with accounting experience. He replaced that guy with a gentleman who was like 30 years old, who was a consultant and had no formal accounting experience at all. And he just immediately made that change. But he had built the relationships with enough people and with that individual, that 30-year-old consultant who took over as CFO. And so he was able to do that, right? And he not only built relationships with the top players, but he was extremely transparent in everything that he did. So all of the employees really trusted him as a CEO, as the chairman, all the employees, because they trusted him so much and because they had that one-on-one relationship with him, they took ownership in their own jobs, in their own spaces. And so the whole bank benefited as a result of his relationship building strengths. And it's really cool to hear his story of how he really built those relationships and took the bank to the next level. And the final one is strategic thinking. And this is my other strength, right? So my three strengths are strategic thinking, influencing, and executing, most heavily focused on influencing and strategic thinking, right? That's just who I am. Those are my strengths. So, strategic thinking, those people are always focused on what could be, right? They're not necessarily as worried about what's happening in the present. They're thinking about the future. They're thinking about what could be. And because of that, these people tend to make better decisions, okay? And so the book, as the example for this strength, talks about Brad Anderson, who was a CEO of Best Buy when they had about 150,000 employees, right? And so what was cool about Anderson was that he actually started off at Best Buy at a very young age, and he worked his way up to store manager. He started off as an employee, worked his way up to store manager, then eventually joined the board of directors and was named president of Best Buy. And he did something that revolutionized the entire electronics store industry, right? Because he was always strategically thinking. What he did was, instead of having the salespeople in his stores work on commission, he took that model away, right? He took the commission away. So no longer was there such competition between all these salespeople, and no longer were customers bombarded with salespeople the second they walked in the door. So Best Buy had a much friendlier atmosphere than every other electronics store, and that is when they just absolutely exploded as far as growth and revenue goes. And so because of his strategic thinking, he was able to see that. Now, what's cool about Anderson is that, and the book actually puts a heavy emphasis on this, is that he was very curious. He was a very curious individual. He would read anything and everything that he could get his hands on, from the Rolling Stone to different biographies to history, anything and everything that he could do to learn more, and then bring that back to his organization, he would do. So it was really cool to see how that curiosity, and again, it's in the book, they go a lot more in detail, how that curiosity and that hunger for knowledge helped him in his main business by him going out and learning all these other different things. And so those are the 4 domains. Again, that's executing, that's influencing, that's relationship building, and that's strategic thinking. Those are kind of the 4 main strengths that the book has identified. Okay? And so now I want to talk about the third point that I want to make, the third takeaway from this book. And that is that the most effective leaders understand their followers' needs. Okay? And I think that this is a truly powerful concept that the book brings up, right? If you are a leader and you have people that are following you and you are taking care of them and you truly understand their needs and you're meeting their needs, you're giving them everything that they desire, that they want, that they need, then they're going to be much more inclined to continue following you, right? Because you're providing for them. You're giving them what they need, right? And so it's interesting how the book breaks it down by 4 different basic needs that most followers have, right? And so if you can master these 4, these 4 needs as in terms of being a leader and providing for these needs, then you can be a entirely more effective leader, right? And so these 4 basic needs are trust, right? Can your followers trust you? The things that you say, are they true, right? Can they believe you in everything that you say? 2 is compassion, right? Do you actually care about them? Do your followers truly feel, does your community truly feel like you have their best interests in heart? Like you care about them? Like you actually are thinking about them in terms of, how can I make this person more successful? How can I help them succeed, right? So that's compassion. 3 is stability. Are you going to stick around, right? Is this going to be a very stable thing? Because as a follower, when they're putting their trust in you, they're compassionate with you, and some days you're there and you show up, and other days you're off and you're not showing up and you're not leading, you're not providing that leadership, and it's very unstable. The opposite of stability is instability. Then they're not going to want to be your followers. They're not going to want to listen to you because you're not solid. You're not that foundation that they need, that strength that they need to follow, right? So that's stability. And the 4th one is hope, right? Can you inspire hope in people? Can you give them that vision, that dream that they need in order to believe in you, in order to put their trust in you, to give you as the leader their followship? I don't even think it's a word, but can they follow you? Right? And so again, there's trust, compassion, stability, and hope. And so I want to read a small part of this book that's talking about this 3rd concept. And what I think is interesting is that the strongest teams that truly do build up these, the strongest leaders that truly build up incredible teams, they are actually magnets for talent, right? And so what's really cool is that when you do understand your followers' needs and you do give them that trust, compassion, stability, and hope, then people are going to start flocking to you, right? And because your team is a magnet for talent, you're going to be able to truly, bring together a powerful team. Now, there's another quote that I want to read you, and it goes, it's talking about how leaders are only as strong as the connections that they make with their constituency. And here's the quote: "Yet we continue to focus on leaders and all but ignore their impact on and the opinions of the people they lead." Right? And that's powerful. If, as a leader, you don't focus on your impact on other people, on the opinions of the people that you do lead, if you're not listening to them and you're trying to truly understand where their pain points are, then you're not going to be able to lead them effectively. And if you're not leading them effectively, they're not going to follow you. Right? So if you want to be a leader, it's really important to truly focus on and understand your followers' needs. Right? And there's one more quote that I want to read you from this book, and then I'm going to wrap this video up. But there's one more important quote that talks about the ultimate test of a leader, right? And this goes back to the first quote that I read, that the best leaders get to live on. And this quote says that perhaps the ultimate test of a leader is not what you are able to do in the here and now, but instead what continues to grow long after you're gone. And so I think that truly embodies the entirety of this book, right? And it truly is not about what you are doing today as a leader that is the most significant, right? Think legacy. Think long term. Think 100 years from now. The things that you're doing, what's going to continue to grow long after you're gone? Because that is a true measure, the ultimate test of a strong leader, right? So, again, Strengths-Based Leadership, it's a fantastic book. Those are my 3 takeaways, the biggest takeaways from it. There's a ton of value in here. Being self-aware is just incredibly important in anything that you're doing. So whether it be business, whether it be you're writing a book, whether it be you're trying to do whatever it is that you're trying to do, knowing yourself, being a strong leader is incredibly important. I highly encourage you to pick up this book. All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a good one.